quietly and with respect, why do your children who were not in residential school, why don't they speak your language, the old language? Why are they English speaking and thinking? And their reply to me was invariably a variation of, we got in so much trouble trying to speak our language, we didn't want our children to have that problem. So they intentionally gave them English to speak in. Now, for those of you who aren't aware of it, and maybe most people aren't because most people may not think about it so much, but the language you think in, boy, I wish that missing tooth wasn't missing, because it gives me a lisp. But the language you think in is who you are. If you think in British English, you're British, because that's how your mind works. A small example. If you speak English from Canada, a Canadian, born in Canada, born in English Canada, and speak English that comes and has been modified, but it came from Britain and Ireland and Scotland, you're going to say something like, boy, the weather is really good today, or boy, the weather is really bad. And if you are from the village and think in the old language, you're going to say words to the effect of, the weather is beautiful, or the weather is ugly. And there's a whole different line of thought there. One puts good or bad to weather, morality, and the other puts functionality and aesthetics to it. It's beautiful. We can go fishing. It's ugly. We're staying in. It's a different way of thinking. And a different way of thinking gives you a different way of living. So if you think in the old language, you live the old language. If you think in English, you're English. You're a colonizer. You're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, no matter what color your skin is. The language you think in is the language of your whole essence and being. Myra and I have been married, 30 years, I do believe. Now, she grew up thinking in Visayan. I grew up thinking in English. And to this day, to this very day, 5 years or so of knowing each other before we got married, 30 years of marriage, living with each other through 2 years of COVID-19, all of that stuff. You would think by now we would have all the little idiosyncrasies sorted out amongst us and have a good time and easy communication. But to this day, we have trouble with yes and no. Because Visayan and English thinking uses yes and no 180 degrees opposite to each other. I can't even describe it. It's just that if I was to ask, I keep using my buddy Rick, I'll use him. How do I put this? Forget it. Just accept the fact that we use it differently. I need another cup of coffee to get into how bizarre this is. But yesterday it happened with one of the ladies, Min, that works in our yard. I said, there are dishes to do. Or no, she said to me, are there dishes to do? I said, yes. And she said, oh, okay. And she thought I meant no. And then I said no, and she thought I meant yes. And then finally I said, wait a minute, Min, wait a minute. And I pointed at the kitchen, and I made the sign I make with my hands when I say dishwashing. And she looked at me and she said, okay, because we couldn't sort out yes and no. It's the way we think. And that is who we are. The language is the result of the culture. This is sort of a chicken and egg thing here. If there's any schooled anthropologists or linguists out there that disagree with me, well, leave me a message. I'm open to a conversation on this. But over thousands of years, when a population is in an area, they develop a way of living. And that way of living has things that are more important and less important to survival. If we take it back to pre-industrial times. And those things that are important to survival have an important place in the language. And it's a waterfall effect. That important place in the language moves down and down and out, and it affects every bit of the language, and the language affects the thought, and the thought creates the culture, and the culture creates the language, and da-da-da-da-da. It's a marvelous cyclic process, I believe. As I say, if there's any professionals out there who disagree with me, let me know. I'm more than willing to be educated by people. I truly am. Because that way I'm not self-educated, which means I don't have a fool for a teacher all the time. Or an ignorant person at the very least. So that is where I got thinking about life in the village. It is a life that is a museum piece. It no longer exists. It was good. It had its bad points. Nobody that I know of thinks slavery is a good deal. Although some people must, because it still exists. And the west coast of Canada, pre-contact and post-contact, as far as I know, the last native slave on the west coast of Canada, and I got this from a very reliable source. He told me that the fellow died sometime in the early 1960s. Yeah, this fellow would show you, well, he wouldn't show me, but he showed this other fellow. He showed my friend. Marks on his arm were the Cannibal Society, a secret society on the West Coast, had bitten hunks out of his flesh and eaten it. Because he was a slave, he couldn't do anything about it. That was going on well into the 1930s, 40s. The secret societies, I would imagine that in one form or another, they're still going on. Now was one of the reasons, not the only reason, but there were a lot of things in the native culture that weren't very good. And it was the belief of the people in power, the colonizers, if you want to call them that this should stop, and they tried to put a stop to it. Thomas Crosby, and at this point I'm going to end this one, was a very famous missionary on the west coast of Canada. There's a marvelous story with him. I served on a mission boat named after him, the fifth one named after him. And one of the first things he set up was a residential school, not as bad as like the ones that the Catholic Church set up later, but it was a school to bring young women to who had been either sold to old men to keep them warm in the winter, or were nearing the age where they would be sold to old men to keep them warm in the winter. And he took those girls out of a bad situation and educated them and trained them to live in the post-contact world. That's a reality, folks. Now it's time to end this, so I'm going to zoom out, and as I zoom out into the modern world, I say goodbye to one and all, and with any luck, we'll talk again tomorrow. Bye-bye.